Welcome back, everybody. This is the Sports File, a 35-year reboot. This is episode number 12. Today's topics will include the Denver Broncos, a look at training camp, and a preview of their upcoming game against the Indianapolis Colts that are happening tomorrow. As I record this on Saturday, they're playing tomorrow in their first preseason game at Indianapolis. We'll also dive into, since we got into a little bit of politics last one, dive into Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. The pick is in for the VP, and we'll talk a little bit about the race that's shaping up. We'll also do a recap of our vacation that we took as a family to Singapore and Bali. So first up, the Denver Broncos training camp. So first preseason game is tomorrow versus the Indianapolis Colts, and I think all eyes are truly on the quarterback race right now. Jared Stidham has clearly stood out during the training camp that's been going on for the last 2.5, 3 weeks now. He should be, right? We've talked a little bit about this in the past, that he's much further along now. He's in year 2 of the system, so it should come with comfort, right? He understands Sean Payton's system. I think he's got the edge clearly over Bo Nix and obviously Zach Wilson. But I think everybody's waiting to see what's Bo Nix going to look like in an actual game, right? Stidham has been incredibly consistent when you think about it for this training camp right now in these plays. He was even quoted as saying, and I'm quoting from an article by the great Nick Kosmider from The Athletic, but he was saying, Stidham just feels so much more comfortable. Quote, "The second year in the system, things are coming more naturally to me," Stidham said. "Last year, I'd call a play and I'm thinking, okay, so I called this. My read is here to here. Now it's much more like second nature, so I'm able to focus more on the defense and what they're doing." So what that means is he's getting a good grasp of Sean Payton's offense finally, and it's becoming second nature to him. He's memorized all the plays. He understands where he has to go, and he's able to process it much faster, which is great. It's great to see. I guess he had his last practice. He just really did tremendous, right? Sit him through 4 touchdowns in as many attempts, so he went 4 for 4 during a red zone period with the first team offense on Thursday. And he's had a real strong preseason. I would say he's probably looking like he's going to be the starter leading into week 1. But again, all eyes are kind of on Bo Nix. Reading much more about Bo, it's been a classic rookie training camp. I think he's got all the talent in the world. This is Sean Payton's guy. I think eventually, for being realistic, the Broncos probably are not going to have the greatest of season. I think their over-under for Las Vegas for wins is like 5.5. And I think that's actually low. Listening to, reading some other articles and listening to some other folks out there, if you were just to look at the Broncos, where they are, this is getting to, I think Bo Nix probably emerges by Thanksgiving-ish time frame as the starter and put him in because they're not going to make the playoffs this year. But just within their division, if we think about that 5.5 number, they could probably split Kansas City. They did it last year. There's a win. If they get really lucky, they beat the Raiders twice, and then they split versus the LA Rams. There's already 4 wins, right? So I think they could easily get to that 6, 7, 8 win mark. 8, I think, would be, the high end. But I think it makes sense to start really thinking about where does Bo Nix fit in. I think personally that you need to play these rookies and you need to get them out there, especially a quarterback. The clock is ticking. You've got a 5-year window with him. Let's see what he can really do. He's been inconsistent, but like even their offensive coordinator said, look, he's struggling where a typical rookie quarterback should, which is when they're installing a new play set, right? The day one of that play set, he really starts to struggle. Other things to watch for with the Broncos here is that they're also, you've got Vale, the wide receiver, who's now in there at wide receiver. He's been the standout rookie according to Sean Payton. I think this clearly marks the end, unfortunately, of Tim Patrick's reign here with the Denver Broncos. Injury plagued, hasn't really done a whole lot in the last couple of years. He was out the last 2 years, and he's sort of really, really tentative at practice right now, and this Vale has really stepped up and is doing great, great things for the Broncos. He did this tremendous one-handed catch that you can go find out there, Devon Vale. If you look at the Denver Broncos Twitter handle, they have this picture. Basically, the ball was right. He turns around, the ball's right on top of him. He literally just sticks up his right arm, and snags it one-handed and brings it in for an incredible catch. Big guy, 6'4", 210. Peyton loves the way he moves through traffic, so I think that's something to watch as well. Is what does he, where does he slot in? I think he's clearly the number 2. He has the ability to get open, which I think some wide receivers have struggled with that were here as well in the past. Think of Jerry Jeudy. And Jerry Jeudy seems very happy that he's no longer with the Denver Broncos based on the interview he gave with Cleveland this year. Really forced the trade. Wanted to be traded last year at the start of the season and didn't get his way. Peyton wanted him here, and then we all know how it kind of turned out last year with the Broncos. I think the other thing to watch for is Broncos released one of their safeties. There was a draft pick from 3 years ago. Guy never really did anything, Caleb. So they went ahead and released him. Interesting to see out there is that Justin Simmons is still out there and still available. Do the Broncos go ahead and make a move and try to re-sign him kind of on that veteran 1-year contract at a minimum contract, maybe with some incentives? Kind of let Justin show other teams he can absolutely play and then sign him. He is only 30 years old, and it's interesting he has been working out locally in the area. So that might be something to keep an eye on too, where we're headed here. And I think also the other thing to see is with the quarterbacks to wrap that up. You've got Stidham at 1, Nix is 2, Zach Wilson is 3. And is there a spot on this roster for Zach Wilson? Does Sean Payton keep 3 quarterbacks as well? Zach would clearly be the third stringer, but do you kind of save that roster spot for someone else? Depending on what happens. So, should be interesting. First game, finally out of practices. Preseason is beginning this week. And you'll have the Denver Broncos at the Indianapolis Colts in week preseason 1. Topic number 2. Let's talk a little bit about the presidential race. Started introducing this last episode. I have an interest in this. I've always had an interest in kind of politics and especially the presidential elections. Kamala Harris is the Democratic nominee. I think they did their roll call virtually, and the delegates selected her. So once she hits the Democratic National Convention, that'll be a formality, stamping her as the candidate for the Democrats. And she went ahead this week and introduced Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota. Definitely a surprise picking him. I think a lot of folks, the pundits out there, thought it would be Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. Very moderate governor. Interesting take, I think, with him as well. Battleground state is Pennsylvania. It would have made a lot of sense. I think there was some concerns, I would say, from probably the Democratic Party was because Josh Shapiro is Jewish and obviously supports Israel. And I think you had some kind of the far left of the party really saying, what about Gaza? Like, we're killing innocent people, blah, blah, blah. We don't have to get into the whole Gaza Israel thing since it's incredibly complicated. But you could see where that would cause some concerns. And I think Kamala ran through her interviews. The finalists were Josh Shapiro, Tim Walz, and Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, Gabby Gifford's husband, the astronaut. And clearly they landed on Tim Walz, and they liked what they heard. Seems like, I was talking to a colleague at work about Tim Walz as well, is that he was saying, and he's French Canadian and he lives over in France now, but he was saying his perspective is, it's super interesting, right? If you were to think what is an American, right? Being an American is such a tough thing to define, right? Like, what do we really stand for? It's a little complicated. You've got, if you were to break it down into regions, right? Americans, in the Northeast, it's much more, I would say conservative, religion is definitely a thing. You're looking at the Catholic and Jewish religions up there are big. So you've got and you've got incredible loyalty. Families stay there. They typically don't leave New England. We're one of the outliers that kind of got out years ago and live in Colorado now. But so you've got that. Then you've got kind of the South and the Bible Belt, and that's traditional, like evangelical Christians, right, that are all down in the South. And then you've got kind of the Midwest, which is, again, incredibly loyal, family, hardworking. Think of the Rust Belt. You're getting into kind of that territory, like Illinois, Indiana. Then you kind of see the farmlands as well through that area, right? You've got a lot of great farms that are out there and the farmers. Then you start entering into the West where it's, a little bit more progressive thinking, I would say, right? It really starts when you hit Colorado. I'd say the only outlier to that is probably Utah, just because of the Mormon religion and the presence in Utah is a little bit more conservative, but it very progressive thinking. And then obviously you get out to the West Coast and they're all about, and when I say progressive, I mean you're open to change. That's really what I'm talking about, is you're open to new ideas, you're open to change. And I think California, Oregon, Washington clearly lead that, right? You can see that just with, there's a reason why so many companies and startups and tech startups especially are all out there, is because they're just constantly evolving and thinking and coming up with new approaches. Whereas things like the Northeast, it's much more, I do this because it's what I know, I don't like change, etc. So complicated. So when you get into a Tim Walz and back to, his take was, this guy, if you were to define an American, right, this guy's probably it. Was in the Army, check, was a teacher, and then he also was a high school football coach. It doesn't get any much more. Oh, and he's also a hunter, right? Talks about how he likes to go hunting in the great state of Minnesota. So it's about as American. And when you step back and think about what does that even mean, like that's exactly what I would say is a teacher, a football coach, joined the Army, was in the Army for 20 plus years, and then now he's the governor of Minnesota. Really interesting guy. I think he's kind of funny. You'll see him walking around in his t-shirt and his camouflage hat. Interesting choice. I think if you were to think about the choice, it's really hard to kind of go after him, in my opinion, right? They're trying to paint him obviously from the Trump Vance perspective is, this guy's left wing, this guy's out there, he hates guns, he hates this, he's going to come after him. It's anything but that. I think he's landing on the side of, we don't want to take away your guns, we want to actually maybe think about the semi-automatic, like is there really a need in this country for those with all of the issues that people are seeing? And I think a guy like Tim Walz can say, look, handguns and rifles for hunting are perfectly appropriate, right? So you can't really attack him there. How do you attack his military? I think J.D. Vance is trying to go down that path without much success. It doesn't land very well. And then it's really hard to attack a guy that's a former teacher as well, right? And is also a former high school football coach, right? I think I love the line the other day, Kamala was, when she was introducing him, is he's had many different titles. I think he was like a sergeant major in the Army. That was one title. He was a teacher, Mr. Walz. He was known as Coach Walz. And then she wound up and said, and he's going to add another title, vice president. So interesting ticket. I don't think, you'll see I guess I take this back, right? Would we see a big bump? I don't know. They were able to raise $30 million, which is still a pretty good number, in 24 hours after they named Tim Walz the VP candidate. And she's raised now, I think the last number I saw was up over 310 million, which is just staggering how much money she's raised. And Trump is really, I think this, I watch a lot more about, now that we're getting closer to the election, I'll bounce between Fox News to hear what they're saying, and then I listen to CNN. I don't really pay attention to MSNBC because it's all pro Harris and Walz. It's going to be just, MSNBC is so slanted to the left. whatever anybody says. But I do like to hear the other perspective and what they're thinking, and listening to various video clips of them. And I think it's typical. Trump right now is definitely retreated, right? He's down in Mar-a-Lago. He's not campaigning. Last night he went to Montana, a state he's going to win easily, and let's be honest, doesn't have the most delegates. So why are you going up there allegedly for some fundraising? But he's not traveling to these battleground states. He's not really making his mark and trying to do it. I think he's really trying to figure out how the heck am I gonna go up against this Kamala Harris Tim Walz ticket now. I think with Biden dropping out and now Kamala's being the candidate, he's gone back to his on purpose, by the way, mispronouncing her name, calling her Kamala and all this other nonsense, which what you'll see these hardcore right people do. They try to mispronounce her name. It's weird. Says she's so liberal, she's this, which she's really not. And we've talked about that last episode, right? She's very moderate. She's pro-business. I think she's just more, leans to the left, or a little bit more progressive when it comes to social issues. And then Tim Walz, I think, is more aligned with her. He did get much more progressive, I would say. He's such an interesting guy. I was listening to the podcast around him as well. To get back to him, was when he was, elected to Congress. He ran, and he lives in a very red Republican district, and he beat the Republican candidate handily. And then he went on to become governor. Same thing, right? So Trump's really trying to figure out what do I say, I think, right now. And it's hard because he's trying to bash Kamala in a lot of ways, the typical rhetoric around, she's left, she's leaning, she's liberal, she's, she, is for abortion, she's for all of this, all the typical talking points, right? And I think he's really struggling at this point to really figure out what's going to stick with her. And it's typical Trump, right? I think I was talking to someone else, is Trump loves chaos. That's his whole thing, right? If it was up to him, the border would always be a mess, right? So he can claim, I can go in and fix the border. I can fix this, right? But he doesn't really do that. He tried to do that with the wall. Net new wall was 57 miles when under 4 years underneath him. So I think he loves this chaos and this disorder. He would say, he came out, for example, and said, after George Floyd, Minneapolis was a mess. Minneapolis, St. Paul, they had all these riots going on there. Tim Walz did nothing. He went into his typical, this guy was weak, blah, name calling. And then Tim Walz, they just simply released a phone call and said, no, actually, Mr. President, back in 2020, here's the phone call where you called me and praised me for bringing in the National Guard and how great of a job I was doing, cleaning it and doing more law and order. And so, but that's classic Trump, right? He even came out today and spoke about at his news conference, which he was sort of struggling to get through. Couldn't hear very well, was mispronouncing things as usual. And then completely made up this random story, which is really a lie, which is something he does, around a helicopter. And he was on with Willie Brown, and the helicopter was going to crash. And Willie Brown, was scared, and he talked to him. And Willie Brown, who used to date Kamala Harris 30 years ago, he was the mayor of San Francisco. Willie Brown was like, I never took a helicopter ride with this guy. I don't know what he's talking about. And then when they went back and they found the helicopter ride that Trump's talking about, it was actually a helicopter ride with Jerry Brown, who was the outgoing governor of California, and Gavin Newsom, who was the incoming governor, was there. So that's Jerry is white, Willie's black. So this guy is just classic stories. And now Trump has doubled down on it, says, I have a log. I know exactly what happened. And I did ride it with him, and everybody, Newsom and Jerry Brown and Willie Brown, are like, yeah, Willie wasn't on that helicopter ride. And oh, by the way, we weren't close to crashing, like you said. So, classic stuff. If you look at the polls right now, how it's polling. Biden drops out on July 21st. And on July 21st, his poll numbers, he had the lead going away. And I'm referencing realclearpolitics.com. Underneath that, they have Real Clear Polling. And what they do is they basically aggregate all of the polls that are happening out there, whether it's, Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, MSNBC, CNN, the New York Times, all the different polls, and they kind of come together and they aggregate them and say, here's where it stands currently, right? So back on July 21st, it says Biden withdraws. Trump held a 3.1 lead, right? He was leading in the polls by an on average of 3.1%. And if you watch this little chart here, because they clearly have it, his Trump's numbers are going up right after he announces he's out. But what's super interesting is Biden was polling the day he dropped out at around 44.8%. And then 2 days later, Harris had already climbed up to 45.9%. And she's been steadily climbing. And what's super interesting, right around the time he names J.D. Vance as his VP, Trump, his polling numbers start collapsing. And they're moving off pretty, they're not going great, right? They're dropping. He was at his high here, July 29th. He's at 48.1%. To August 5th, he's down to 46.8%. So you're seeing a drop of almost close to 2 percentage points. And that's really the intersection. As of August 5th, Harris overtakes the polling numbers by 0.2. So a tiny number, right? Tiny number. But now she's continuing to climb. He's almost plateaued. He's climbed a little bit. He went down to 46.8. He's now at 47.1. She's all the way up to 47.6. And if you look at the aggregate poll now number, on average, she's up almost a half a point now. So the average would be Harris is at 46.6%. Trump's at 47.1. So practically a dead heat. And this is averages between July 22nd through August 7th. Various polls have, CNBC, Rasmussen has Trump up, CNBC's +2, Trump's +5. NPR, interestingly enough, has Harris +3. Morning Consult +4 for Harris. I'm just picking random ones. Marquette +4 for Harris. Harvard Harris polling is +4 Trump. Wall Street Journal +2 for Trump. And then the New York Times +1. So you're seeing what you would predominantly see, whether it's, more of a conservative slant like the Wall Street Journal, or more of even, say, a more kind of left-leaning journalism like the New York Times, right? You're seeing these polls kind of showing what they are. The New York Times is saying, well, Trump's up by 1. Wall Street Journal, Trump's up by 2. So the aggregate, like I was talking about, is Harris has really overtaken her. And you can go up and check out these numbers. They do actually a really, really nice job of laying out kind of these charts, and you can kind of see what's happening and where it's all going. But she really has caught lightning in a bottle. It'll be super impressive. The DNC convention is coming up here momentarily. I think it's in Chicago. And it's starting August 19th through the 22nd. You can expect a bump out of that as well. I think her numbers will continue to go up. And if she can maintain this is going to be one heck of an election coming up. She's got a couple tests. I think she does have to start talking to the media. That's a valid point that the Trump Vance side is bringing up. You really got to get out there. Maybe sit down for some interviews. This is where historically she hasn't done as well. She comes across hard or not as up to speed on certain issues. She still has some work to do on her website. Like, what are her policies? All it is right now is donation. She's only been the candidate for a little over 2 weeks, but still, you really do need to start seeing some, what does she really stand for with her polling numbers. Interesting to watch. We'll probably recap after the DNC. We'll keep checking some of these poll numbers. But for that is it for the presidential election coming up. Topic number 3. Hey, Singapore, Bali. So we got to take a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Singapore and Bali. We're able to, family vacation. All 3 kids came with my wife and I. It was, my son, who's in California for his internship, was able to kind of meet. So we met in San Francisco. My other son coming back from studying abroad in Madrid for the year. He flew from Madrid, met us in Singapore. Brought his girlfriend along as well, who's from Madrid. So it was a great time. We had a family of 6. We started off in Singapore. This was where it was just us, the family of 5. The Barkley Bunch, as we like to refer to it as. Singapore, I used to travel there many years ago, 2015, 2016. I went to Singapore for work 6 times in 6 months, heavy travel. So, and we're short. I was there for less than a week each time. Love the city of Singapore. It's an interesting place, city, state, country. You're in Southeast Asia. You are 85 miles north of the equator. Think hot, hot, hot. It is hot. It is humid. It is, I mean, it's no joke, right? It is exhausting. We did this, one of the things we did to put it in perspective is we walked the Simple Mile and around midday, and we were absolutely wiped out, sweating beyond belief. It was a total mistake to walk. But getting back to Singapore, we were able to stay at a hotel kind of a little bit outside of the downtown kind of area. The downtown area, I'd say, is a place called Marina Bay. It was all built up. That's where you see the huge buildings, and you'll see the towers, the Marina Bay Sands Hotel and Casino. If you've ever looked at it, it's 3 pillars with this huge, it looks like a boat on top of it, but it's an infinity pool. So we were able to kind of really sightsee Singapore. We were really using it as to get over jet lag. I mean, for us to get to Singapore, it took about 19 hours from Denver. And they're 14 hours ahead, so you're really messed up when you land. We basically landed at night, early evening, grabbed a quick bite to eat, and then you try to get on schedule and fall asleep. And it really does take a couple days to really get over the jet lag and kind of kind of get on time. So we were really using Singapore for the 4 days to do some sightseeing, see it as a tourist as opposed to being there for work, but then really get ready for Bali. And Singapore, great place to visit. One of my sons is a huge F1 racing fan, so we were able to see kind of where the pit row there is for that, and the main drag where all the stands are built up and where the garages are, where you're able to actually just walk through that. We were able to kind of walk through their kind of botanic garden-ish area, which is a super pretty area. Had some authentic Singaporean type food, which is spicy crab. There's this place it's called Jumbo Seafood. They give you whole crabs, and it's in this kind of it really is a messy sauce, but it's really good. It's sweet and spicy. We were able to eat virtually on the beach. So we did that. We went to another great restaurant called Cuomo, and it's owned by Tao Restaurant Group. If you've ever been out to Las Vegas, there's a bunch of different restaurants out there. Awesome restaurant. We had amazing seafood, sushi, you name it. We had it there. It was great. Went to the kind of hawker stalls. If you've ever seen it, maybe you can Google Anthony Bourdain when he's gone to Singapore a couple times. They're super famous. And we went to one of the more famous hawker stalls there and had a classic Singapore dish, chicken and rice. It's the most simple, basic thing. They do it really, really well. They add some sort of a sauce to it, and it's kind of all mixed together. And when you kind of mix it all together, and it's really good. It is plain, I would say, but there is a little bit of flavor. So we had a great time in Singapore. We were really looking forward to getting to Bali, because Bali was where we were going to be for close to 7 days, 6 nights is where we were, and we stayed at this beautiful resort there. Got to Bali. My son's girlfriend met us from Madrid. Checked in. This resort was amazing. The service was incredible. I would say this: the people of Bali are the nicest people I've ever met in my life. They are friendly. They're constantly talking to you, smiling the whole time. The customary, you don't really shake hands over there. They just do the kind of put their hands together and bow. They are incredibly nice people. We did a little bit of sightseeing. We did this kind of tour of they call it water sports. So we did parasailing. We did a banana boat ride, which we'd never been on, where they tip you then at the end. Jet skiing. We went to visit this kind of water spout area too as well. Had another little lunch on the beach. This kind of classic nasi giri is what Indonesian food. So Bali is part of Indonesia. Nasi giri is kind of their big comfort food. It's really just a rice-based dish with almost like a fried rice, really. And they put either seafood in there or they put chicken and then some veggies in there. Really, really good, flavorful. Had that for lunch as well. And then our kids went off and did an ATV and then whitewater rafting, and that was about 2 hours away. So they took off and kind of went into kind of the rainforesty type area of Bali and did that. And the resort was just super relaxing. Great pool, great resort complex. Beach was amazing. We kind of, our big thing that we did is we had a dinner on the beach one night, which was just so much food that we couldn't finish it. Just food and wine. And then they'd set up a little bonfire for you where they gave this super refreshing coconut dessert. I literally at the end of the vacation turned to my wife and was like, I don't want to leave. We should stay another week. And if I didn't have a job, we probably would have, but we had to get back. But we just had the best time. It was awesome to be with my whole family. The food at the resort was amazing as well. We went to this one place, the Beach Grill. We went there a lot, 3 or 4 times, and just ate just great meals. Everything they had on the menu was great, whether it was the steaks or the chicken or the fish or the pizza that they served. It was all great. And then we talked about the nasi giri, their kind of comfort food that they have as well. We also, they have a dedicated restaurant for breakfast, and this was a breakfast buffet, and they basically tailored the buffet for all sorts of culture. So you had the traditional Western breakfast, so think eggs, bacon, potatoes, stuff like that. Then they had a whole pastry section. Then they had an India section. They had a Japanese section. They had a Chinese section. So the catering to everybody who kind of came there. What I liked best about Bali as well is that there were not a lot of Americans there. We saw a lot of people from India or from Australia, a couple people from Europe and the UK. And the funny part about it was there was a couple of other folks there that were definitely from the US. And at one point, we're just kind of chilling out in the beach area, enjoying the beautiful breeze, and the weather was perfect. It's about 82 degrees every day and sunny. And we hear this really loud couple, and I just turn to my wife and say, of course it's the friggin' Americans. The Americans are always loud. But pool area was great. The grounds were beautiful. Funny story, they have monkeys there. I thought, well, we'll never see a monkey. And sure enough, the first morning, they leave a fresh basket of fruit in our room. And that monkey, we left the door open, cracked, and he came flying in. And side note, monkeys are not like Curious George. They're not super friendly. They're actually bigger than I thought they would be. And this sucker was kind of angry as well. Fortunately enough, we kind of stopped looking at him and we thought at one point he was going to come at us, and kids were behind me, and my wife had just came out of the shower area, and she had closed those doors, and she was like, get the monkey out of here. And we called down to the front desk, and they came, and monkey, basically we kind of stopped making eye contact and walked around, and the monkey lost interest and kind of scattered and went away, and then we quickly shut the door. But that was our first day. Not a great start, but it was looking back, and it was sort of kind of funny. And we, of course, my kids have it all on video. So Bali was great. I definitely would highly recommend it. If you want, it takes a while to get there. It's about 20 hours round trip, 21-ish. Just great area. I loved it. I probably won't go back because it is so remote. But I have always sort of jokingly said I'd love to go to Bali, and sure enough, we did. So great family vacation. School's about to start here in Colorado. We've only got 2 weeks left this summer. My son's back in California doing his internship, and it was just wonderful to be away with them for a couple weeks. Okay, that's been episode number 12 of the Sports File. Please like, comment, subscribe to wherever you get your podcast from, and I'll talk to you next week.